Welcome to the Customer Wins podcast, where business leaders discuss their secrets and techniques for helping their customers succeed and in turn grow their business.
Hi, I'm Rich Walker, the host of The Customer Wins, where I talk to business leaders about how they help their customers win and how their focus on customer experience leads to growth. Some of our past guests have included Cormac Murphy of Cash Tech Advisor Solutions, Mark Friedenthal of Tolerisk, and Corey Westfall of Mobile Assistant. Today, I'm speaking with Praveen Ghanta, CEO and founder of Fractional. And today's episode is brought to you by Quick, the leader in enterprise forms processing. When your business relies upon processing forms, don't waste your team's valuable time manually reviewing the forms. Instead, get Quick. Using our Form Extract API, simply submit your completed forms and get back clean, context-rich data that reduces manual reviews to 1 out of 1,000 submissions. Visit quickforms.com to get started. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Michael Lieberman of Advisors Capital Management for introducing me to Praveen. Go check out their website at advisorscapital.com and find out how they tailor portfolio management solutions to meet the unique financial objectives of advisors' clients. Okay, I've been looking forward to this episode for quite some time. Praveen Ghanta is the CEO and co-founder of Fractional. He's the founder of 4 companies, has had successful exits on 2 that were bootstrapped. That's familiar to me. I'm bootstrapped. You may know him from having built HiddenLevers over a decade, serving financial advisors with portfolio stress testing and proposal generation functionality. He sold HiddenLevers to Orion in 2021, and now he's building the future of work at Fractional. Praveen, welcome to the Customer Wins.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rich. And, I think I was mentioning this to you before, but I wish that we'd gotten to know each other better while I was at HiddenLevers, because we could have used Quick, with so many of the advisor, honestly, all the DocuSign madness. If I never had to deal with that again and we'd known about Quick, I think that would have been very helpful. So,
Man, there's
cool stuff
so
you're
many
doing.
opportunities like that. I wish, but we're here now, and
Yep.
hopefully we do get to work together. So for those who haven't heard this podcast before, I talk with business leaders about what they're doing to help their customers win, how they built and deliver a great customer experience, and the challenges to growing their own company. Now, what Praveen's doing, I think, is awesome. So let's understand your business a little better, Praveen. How does your company help people?
Yeah. So how do we help, our customers? There's a bit of a backstory, so Fraction, firstly, what do we do? We help companies to work with fractional talent. Sort of, we have our tagline, if you will, is the best talent already has a job, so why not
Right?
hire them fractionally? Which, I think everybody agrees that, yeah, the best folks do typically already have a job. That part is true. What we sort of perfected over a decade at my last company, HiddenLevers, was working with fractional talent. And we were able to leverage that, led to a great deal of our success. So after selling that business, I thought, well, can we help other companies in this same way? Can we help scale this idea out? So, and we've started to see there be a trend toward, I think probably listeners, whether on LinkedIn or other places, have started to see this fractional word coming up more and more. So it's definitely on the rise. How do we help clients with that? Well, our goal is to have a vetted pool of talent on the one hand that we can help clients to leverage and help companies in need of that expertise, and also I actually think that it's a bit different. All of us, for most of our professional careers, we've probably worked in, full-time roles where the expectation is that, yeah, everybody's around, I don't know, whether it's 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever the hours are, Monday to Friday. Of course, we're in the world of remote work now, but you're still available, by Slack or however. And so you're engaged, in that kind of synchronous time period. And there's a lot of value in that, right? Being able to go back and forth with your teammates in real time. We get these concerns from companies that, oh wait, is that how this is going to work, or how will I engage with someone fractionally? So what we realized is that we needed to help companies to understand you can get access to talent that you couldn't otherwise afford taking the fractional approach, not only because you're paying for only part of their time, but also the secret that we discovered was that a lot of really talented folks are willing to, in effect, discount their surplus hours. They're willing to, in exchange for having a sort of steady sideline, they're willing to kind of discount, and that makes it more affordable to work with some really top folks. But we realized we need to help put some structure around how that kind of is organized on behalf of clients, because again, just making sure that the communications things and all of this stuff, works smoothly. That's where we realized that we could add value in sort of onboarding folks into this fractional world. And then once they see it work, then like, oh yeah, I need somebody to help with this. I need somebody to help with that. And while we started in the software engineering world, because that's sort of my background, and a capability I could help with, we've broadened beyond that, and we've tinkered as far as helping with accountants, helping with actually paraplanners in the financial sort of wealth management world, and here's the furthest afield: telehealth, doctors.
Really? I
So
had no
so we've
idea.
really even gone that far.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I know a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders think of fractional CFO, even chief marketing officer, but I don't know how many think about their technology team being fractional because traditionally it's either you hire in-house or you outsource. And even when you outsource, you're either doing a project or you're getting somebody allocated that they've chosen, et cetera. It's kind of out of your hands. But what you're talking about, I think, is a little bit more finessed, right? You're bringing this to the technical world, and I want to ask this question actually: are the people that you're bringing in fractionally actually employed at Google or Facebook or some other company full time, and they are actually giving you surplus hours, or do they work full time for Fraction?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so we firstly, I should note that we work solely with US talent. And the reason for that is one of the things that we learned in our own experience doing this ourselves was that there's a lot of great folks, here in the United States that are interested in this kind of work. And that's where we can really find, senior level, experienced folks who have the capacity, but they also have the tacit knowledge in specific industries. And so some of the companies that we've been privileged to serve are in healthcare, in health tech. And so what we found, and what they've told us, clients have told us, is that the difference in having someone who's actually experienced the American healthcare system, used it as a customer, it makes a lot of difference in the just tacit understanding of requirements. Like if you've never paid a copay,
Hmm.
or just dealt with all of the insurance sort of like, is this approved? Is this in network, out of network? So in many of these sort of healthcare specific situations, and just to use one vertical industry, one example, there's a lot of value that comes with that. And so we found that that's a differentiation, sort of with further afield. But in answer to your question, so uh, of the talent pool that we work with, we actually found that the strongest single source of talent for us nowadays is bootstrapping founders, interestingly
Is it
enough.
really?
Yeah, so we're finding a lot of technical talent. They are starting their own companies, or they're interested in starting their own company, but they still need some cash flow, pay the rent and whatnot. And so fractional work is one way for them to do that. So, but that's the strongest in terms of because when you think about it, they've got that founder hat on. They're
Hmm.
thinking for themselves, they're thinking from a business perspective, what do they need to be doing for clients? So they're able to sort of step into some of those shoes. Well, as I'm helping Rich to build quick, well, what are these customers trying to do with these forms? Those kinds of questions. Whereas oftentimes, whenever you deal with, lots of folks who are great, let's say developers or great sort of workers, employees, they're not sort of putting themselves in that decision making space because they've never had to before. And so
Hmm.
that's where we found like a really good talent pool is in founders. We do also work with some employees, who are at larger companies who maybe just have spare capacity, just owing to their role. And we found that somewhere around the 10-year mark, particularly in technical roles, you'll find a fair number of really talented engineers who they get stuck.
Hmm.
And how they get stuck is they're maybe not the kinds of folks that want to be managers or manage other people. Maybe that's not part of their skill set or part of their interest. And so the avenues for further advancement in their career start to, some of those start to close off. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be manager of the team. So they kind of end up staying in maybe a senior engineering role. And as often happens, like once you really got the reins on a particular role, it gets easier, relatively speaking. So you're still
Right.
adding value for your company, but the tax that it is mentally for you is much lower. So they get bored at that
Hmm.
point. And that's when we find folks like that some of them are interested actually in helping startups precisely because it's interesting
Right.
and it
Yeah.
scratches that itch.
Oh,
So
that makes
an
so much
example,
sense.
yeah, an example would be there's a guy that we work with who is sort of a fractional CTO, not just a fractional C level, but he also does hands-on work as well. And he actually sold a business. So he was, a founder, actually a YC-backed founder, and he managed to sell that startup to a larger company. Now, you can have exit that he never needs to work again, but he is employed. He's got a great position as a director of engineering at a large company, large tech company. And but again, to scratch that itch of working on cool projects, he's been working with us for the past 6 months.
Okay, now you're making me envious. I mean, I love my company, but I always love seeing startups and seeing what people are doing. And you're getting this window into all these different projects and opportunities, et cetera. I think that's amazing. And you actually described how we started quick. Uh, so I think a lot of people know now. My mom is my co-founder, and she and I were both technologists. We did consulting to pay the bills. I mean, the software product just wasn't paying the bills for years, and we just took on projects on the side to do it. So we were essentially doing what you're saying.
Right.
It was project based for various companies. It was more consulting, but it makes a lot of sense. So that's awesome. And if you're hiring your company, you may be getting a lot more knowledge capital than just the software side of it. You're seeing big picture and other industries and other avenues that people have been exercising. I think that's fantastic. So, what is, I mean, you kind of said this, but what are some of the myths and misconceived notions people come to you with that they're trying to overcome that you help them see differently, aside from what
Mhm.
some of the things you said?
Yeah, it's as I think this sort of fractional concept has become a little better known. There's still an assumption that a lot of it is C level, or maybe
Mhm.
maybe sort of leadership level only. And that does work, and it's become more and more common that you'll have like a fractional CFO for a small company because they don't need a full-time CFO, or maybe even a fractional head of marketing, like a CMO, or lots of roles in that vein. But what we found, and so this was in our background experience at Hidden Levers. So similar to the story you were telling, Rich, with Quick, and you were paying the bills by consulting. Well, at Hidden Levers, I preloaded that work. I was working fractionally before starting the company. While I just had my day job, I was also doing that, and I was sort of building up a cash reserve. Then, whenever I started Hidden Levers, this is like 2010 or so. I knew that I had reserves. I did actually start fractionally as well, though. I kept my day job and did it as sort of like a nights and weekends project for the first 9 months. We start to get like some inkling that, maybe financial advisors are interested in this portfolio stress testing thing. So then we, start at somewhere around month 9 or month 10, I go all in full time. But I have this reserve that I built up from before. Once we got customer traction and we started getting revenue in the door, we still couldn't afford to hire another full-time engineer. So the fractional piece for us, the difference between hiring a C-level person was we were trying to figure out, can we hire folks part-time to help us build the software? So actually write code.
Yeah.
And that was the divergence for us, is that as we grew that team, quite a few of our senior engineers that were doing hands-on work, they would work half time, so roughly 20 hours a week for us. And that's one of the big misconceptions that we see in the market, and we're always educating around this, is that you can absolutely build a product, with fractional engineers. Now, would I advocate that your team be entirely fractional? Of course not. We found in our own experience, with our own company, that the red line is somewhere between a third and half of headcount. And so on our product engineering team, for instance, it was 5 out of 12 folks. So
Are
not
fractional
quite
or not
half.
fractional?
There were 5 were fractional. So it's
Okay.
that 40 some odd percent. And
Yeah.
that worked, but I don't think we could have gone too much higher than that. Obviously, you need folks around, during the middle of the day for production support, and all those
Well,
sorts of
but
things.
you're also starting to answer one of my other questions I want to come up with, which is, are you losing out on knowledge capital and knowledge transfer if you have a fractional person? Let's say this fractional person builds some component of your system, a webhook, an API, whatever, and then they go off to another project because you don't need them anymore. Do you lose that knowledge transfer?
Right. Well, so the model that we saw working successfully for us was that our fractional talent, engage when we were, engaged with them at Hidden Levers, they actually stayed with us. So we had zero turnover in the fractional pool, and they
Nice.
stayed with us as long as any of our full-time employees. So one person was with us for 9 years.
Wow.
Another guy by the name of Terrell, his case was funny. he and a couple of them actually made it across the acquisition. So that's a question we get sometimes because, of course, we're working with startups. Is this a problem in M&A? And I can say from personal experience, no, because we had, the 400 or 500 pages of M&A documents, and we had like the expensive lawyers reviewing everything, and all of that passed due diligence. And
Hmm.
actually, a couple of those folks went on to work for our acquirer, and one of them, as far as I know, is still there. And so
You
he's
mean they
pretty
took
close
full-time
to
gigs?
yes, and so they're still contracting in this manner, fractionally, and helping support that. I guess it's not the Orion Risk Intelligence team, and so yeah, so that was able to continue. So that longevity and the sort of knowledge, human capital that you build up over time, it's absolutely possible to preserve that in this way as well. To be a little bit more precise about the working environment and this is the same that we do today with clients, our expectation is that these folks are attending 2 to 3 stand-ups, like daily engineering stand-ups per week. So they're part of that process, and they're part of the sprint review process, or whatever kind of key meetings that a team has in place. They're there, so it shouldn't feel
In other
terribly
words,
different from working.
you want them to be integrated into the team, not just, hey, handle this ticket, handle this project. You want them to be part of the process and part of the overall team, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what we found, is the most successful approach. And
And do you focus on cultural fit as well?
so that's an interesting question because so one of the things that we did that we realized was very helpful kind of from a process perspective was that this whole sort of interview process that a lot of companies use when hiring full time, that's uh, sometimes it's quite onerous on the client themselves because it's like, oh, we need so and so to talk to this person. Now we need so and so, and it's like it's 3 rounds deep or more. Maybe it's 5 rounds deep. All of that. So in place of that, we view our job as being vetting the talent's capability. So engineering roles, all of whatever the tech stack may be, making sure that they're bringing that to the table, and we're also vetting them. So this was a key ad for us. One of the biggest challenges we've seen, because on occasion, hey, everybody's human, so folks have different strengths and weaknesses. But a strength that we found that is mandatory for these kinds of roles is the ability to communicate on Slack or Teams or any of these messaging platforms, because that's how modern work gets done, right?
Right, of course.
And so, but not everybody's great at that. And so we actually have taken to testing for that as well. So our goal is to bring somebody
Smart.
that's vetted, not just an oral communication like we're doing here, but also the Slack team style communication. And then of course the core, engineering work itself. So bring all those facets to the table. Now, does that mean that that person is going to be a perfect fit culturally with any particular organization? No, not yet. That's a lot of the pieces, but that's not everything. And so there, rather than jump through a bunch of interviews, we do a risk-free trial process.
Okay.
And so, work with the person and see if they actually gel with, kind of the way that you do things.
Yeah. And then are your clients big clients, small clients, startups, other bootstrapped entrepreneurs? Who's attracted to this most?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to describe like, well, what's the ideal client? What do we learn, and what have we learned about that? And so who can we help the most? What we found in short is that companies sort of between 10 and say 50 employees. So
Hmm.
startups that are, out of the garage, so to speak, or they've got revenue flowing, and they're trying to grow from there, which interestingly, that lines up almost precisely with my own company and my own background experience with HiddenLevers and when we were able to take advantage of the talent. We get a lot of inbound requests from early stage founders who
Hmm.
are, pre-revenue, pre-product, and we've figured out a way to help them using low code solutions, maybe to help build an MVP or something like that. But in practice, the my recommendation, to anybody who ends up listening who is a founder who is thinking about that, is that if you're the non-technical founder, that finding that person who can be the technical founder, I think it's still pretty important. As much as anything, you need a partner in crime. It's very difficult to do everything solo. And
Yeah,
so
super hard.
we found that, yeah, it's hard for us or for any vendor for that matter to replace that. So
Yeah.
we tend to fit in much better, if those pieces are in place, then we're in a much better position to be helpful. On the large side, well, we do have some outlier clients that are a little bit larger. The vast majority are between 10 and 50. We joke that if you've got an HR department, you're probably too big for us.
That's it. I think that's a good one. I want to go back to this thing of having a technical co-partner, co-founder, because I think what I want people to understand about that is when you don't have a technology background and you're working with a technologist to implement a technology you want, the expectations could be unrealistic or not understandable and not translate well from both sides. And having a technologist in the world who can actually speak geek and English, as I like to say, and
Mhm.
translate the requirement is really the key here. I can't tell you, you've had this, I'm sure. Hey, I've got this great idea for an app. How much is it going to cost to build it and bring it
Yeah.
to market? I'm like, nothing less than six figures. Well, what do you mean? It's such a simple app. No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm sure
Yeah,
you
no, I
see that,
literally had
right?
that conversation yesterday. And so the funny thing is, and so what we recommend in those cases when, we talk to a founder that they don't have that technical, person to work against is, we're honest about it. We say, listen, in this case, and we learned this the hard way that, you know, here's the thing that we learned the hard way. A lot of non-technical founders or the business founder, they'll come in, they've got an idea and it may be a great idea, but there's this notion that, oh, we'll just build the app, let's say, and we'll hand it to you, and then it's done, right? And of course, we all know that the reality is that when you launch your MVP, that's the starting gun. That's not the finish line. It's
Yeah,
literally the starting gun. And two things could happen from there. One, your MVP, this app or product that you're putting out there, um, crickets. Actually, that often happens. And then you go through
often.
this whole process of trying to figure out who could be interested in this and customer discovery and all of that. There's a lot of work to be done on that front. Now, it's possible that that doesn't succeed. And then how good or bad the app was probably was irrelevant. And it's sort of like neither here nor there. But if you do succeed, which is the problem you want to have, what happens? Well, the customers start asking questions. They've got
Mhm.
feature requests. There are bug reports. There's all of the things that come along with now you're building a real tech company. And so actually, what we tell people is that actually, if you succeed, you're going to have more needs, not less. And
Yeah.
that I think can be something that sometimes for early stage founders, it's hard to wrap their head around. It's like, wait, what? It's no, I just need the app. Well, you need the app, and then you need all of those requests and all of those bugs and all those things fixed on an ongoing basis for the duration of your company if you're thinking of yourselves as a software company.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. What's the adage? It's an entrepreneur, but I think especially true for a tech company is somebody who jumps off a cliff and builds the parachute on or the plane on the way down. And if
Yeah.
you keep flying, then you got to keep building it and make it fly better. It is, man, it is such a journey. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit because you, I'm sure, love AI as much as I do being in the tech space. You guys are doing some pretty interesting things with AI, but I want to talk about how you're employing AI with your team members and they're using AI with customers. So let's talk about that. How is that working? What are they doing? How is AI affecting software development?
Yeah, for sure. So, and we really started to see this probably late last year. Of course, all these tools come out, ChatGPT and everything, and probably beginning of 2023 is when it's a huge splash by then, and everybody's like, "Oh wow, this is going to change everything." And of course, we're seeing it continue to accelerate. But early on, a lot of developers were sort of playing around, like, "Okay, can this thing really help us write code?" And a lot of folks were sort of dismissive. They're like, yeah, you can use it for like to play around with and whatever. What? And I'll be honest, actually, even myself in early experiments, I was like, seems modestly interesting. But what changed was that one of the fractional CTOs that we work with quite a bit, guy Jeremy, he was showing he was demonstrating firstly with his work an incredible degree of productivity
Hmm.
and was able to juggle more fractional clients than we would normally think possible and do it successfully. And so I got to talking to him about like his approach, and it caused me to change the way that I think about using AI. So I told myself, all right, I'm going to get into some code and I'm going to force myself to make AI write it first every time. I'm not allowed to write the code myself. I'm only allowed to prompt And that forced me to get a little bit better at asking, Copilot in this case, to, what I wanted to write. So, write me some code that will do this and do it in this way and use, this library to do it and give it like, instead of giving it like the 5-word prompt or the 1-sentence prompt that sometimes we do, no, let me make it a short paragraph at least and really try to describe what I'm after.
Mm-hmm.
And what we realized is like, you know what? In the same way that we would do if we were writing requirements for a more junior developer, let's feed the tool as though it's a junior developer. So then all of a sudden you see the quality of the code it's putting out. It's much higher. Now, is it high enough for prime time? No, it's not, but it's much closer. So we realized that this pairing, and this is what Jeremy, so his background is he's actually sort of a CTO level person who still likes to be hands on. And so what we found was pairing generative AI with really senior talent, more senior talent than you would usually think of using in a role. It's actually a great match because now they're able to generate code super fast, right? Because they don't have to write it all themselves.
Yeah.
And based on their experience, they're actually able to review that code. So it's like pretend the AI is the junior developer. So it's coming up with all of this like meh to like mildly good code. Now you've got a CTO actually code reviewing it in real time and beating it into shape.
Yeah.
And so
That's
that
awesome.
process is where we found in aggregate, I would say relative to a traditional engineering approach, about a 4x productivity gain. And I know that that sounds crazy, but we're finding that about half of that total gain, so the doubling of speed, is the AI piece, and the other half is actually that you're using a CTO's time and you're not asking a mid-career or like a developer with 5 years of experience. No, you're
Yeah.
bringing a lot more experience to the table.
I think that is so impressive. And I think about my days programming, which are behind me for the most part. And some of the things I would do is I would use Microsoft Excel to automate building code because maybe I had 40 property statements they're all formatted the same
Mhm.
way, right? And I
Yep.
don't want to type out 40 things over and over and over again. So I'd build a formula, type in the 40
Mhm.
property names, and boom, output the properties and paste them into my code. And AI can do that so fast for repetitive type
Yep.
stuff. And what you're describing also makes me think about how we write technical specs. If you write really good business requirements and really good functional requirements, and you take that and have GPT read it, and then say, now give me the framework of a technical spec, and then in detail, now tell me how to write this API. But you can't just say, give me an API. You have to say, here's what I want it to do. Here are the parameters I want, the properties. So it's the same thing with the code that you're talking about. It's not just, hey, give me a function that opens a file. I want these properties to go with it, and I want this functionality and these validations. So the prompting is really critical, and you're reinforcing something I keep saying. So I'm going to share this with my team because I told them a few days ago. In fact, Praveen, I'm going to give you credit. You've totally inspired me in our prior conversations. I don't want to hire anybody who doesn't have the skill set to use AI to help them
And
code
willingness.
and the
That's the
willingness.
other piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I've said this just yesterday. Like when Microsoft Excel came out and was replacing Lotus 123 and when Word was replacing Word Perfect, if you didn't learn those, you got left behind.
Yep.
And that's what this is right now. If you're not learning how to code better with AI as your assistant, you're going to get left behind because I'm going to hire that person and not the one who doesn't have that skill. Oh, I
Yeah.
think
No,
that's
absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing. And so we adapted our interview process so that we're now sort of generative AI first, even within the interview process. It's enabled me to sort of baseline assumption I should expect that folks can accomplish more faster. And so I want to see that, whenever we're talking to candidates. We still see, I would say that of engineers that I speak with, probably more than half are have not really truly adopted it yet. Like
Yeah.
they're using these tools as sort of glorified autocomplete, which is a little helpful,
Yeah.
but that's a tiny, percentage of what it's capable of doing. And actually, yeah, just to build on your example, you were saying you're using Excel to build sort of a lot of repetitive code. Yeah, you can have these tools write a whole bunch of, you know, SQL statements for you or other boilerplate kinds of things that you may not either you don't want to do it or it's going to take you hours because it's so just this nuisance process and generate all of that much more quickly, enabling you to actually spend your time thinking about the actual hard problems, because the hard problems, by the way, the stuff that really needs doing, it's not there yet.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
I will say, I think one of the best uses of these large language models with coding is to figure out and do the research, figure out what you need to be doing. And so, I mean, I'm doing this recently, asking it questions like which methodology is best practice in the industry, which would have a better, speed, which one would have lower storage requirements or cheaper storage requirements. And these are the tool sets I'm looking at, and it will tell you the pros and cons. Or if you just say, here's a problem I want to solve, it'll come back and say, use this library, use this methodology. And I think that saves so much research and development time in the process because you're not trying to figure out, well, what component do I need to make this actually work? It just told you. Like ChatGPT knows. This stuff's fascinating. So I'm wondering if you're seeing, I'm going to take another step back. A long time ago, there was an ebook that I read. I think it was called Ship It Now. You ever heard of that by chance?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, and so the concept for everybody to understand, I think the concept applies to anything you're designing, not just software. The concept was you need to boil down your design into very, very small incremental steps. And so like in a screen that you're just designing, maybe you need a button. You'd say design the button. And then the next one is do the click of the button. And the next one is what the click does, et cetera. And you break it into these small parts because then when you give it to a developer, they're responsible for that 10 or 15 or 30 minutes of work. And it's very clear what to do. To me, that's a lot of what the prompting is about. You have to be really, really clear on what you do. And the outcome is if you're really clear and you understand it well, you have great quality code coming out and great solutions coming out. So I'm wondering if you help clients do that or see it from that perspective, especially as you're putting AI into this world.
Yeah, we're actively looking at because of course there's so many of these AI tools that have come out, and some of them are helpful as we're discussing in the actual process of writing the code. But some of them are helpful in the design process, in the process of taking the designs and creating requirements. Now, each of those steps, let's say hypothetically, and I'm sure that folks may have heard about these demos of like, oh, they've automated the entire software development process.
Right.
And the reality is there's a bit of error. Like I think on a good day, the output from a lot of these tools will be something like 80% on point. Sometimes, very occasionally, and I mentioned like SQL queries and things like that. Sometimes it's 100% with stuff like that, but
Mm-hmm.
but quite often it'll be 80%. Quite often it'll be 50. At any rate, that's still helpful if you've got the right kind of senior talent taking that as an input, cleaning it up before you get to the next stage. But you could imagine if you were to prompt one of these design generation tools to generate like the design for these pages that have XYZ features on them for this new product I want to build. So it designs some like Figma mocks for you.
Yeah.
And then you said, okay, now take these Figma mocks and turn this into um, detailed technical requirements and populate Jira or another project management tool. And so there are tools that'll do that. So now it'll do that. Now take these Jira requirements and let's actually run this through code generation to actually generate something. Well, if you're introducing 20% error each step of the way, like a good case, right? Well, we can all do the compounding and see that the final product is going to be so far off the mark. And that's why instead of just trying to chain all this stuff together, and I actually don't believe so the we could go way down the rabbit hole of like how far is AI going to go. I'm more, at least right now, from what I can see on the wavelength of it looks like we're limiting out, like we're kind of getting to, I don't know if it's a plateau, but it doesn't look like it's going to be able to do all of our jobs tomorrow. And
Right. Of
so,
course.
and so, instead, having the right, and in some cases, this is where the fractional approach comes back in, having the right fraction of the right person's time to audit and clean up each of those steps, well, you can still get a high level of productivity then without having like compounding errors where garbage, then it's just total garbage out because it's like errors, errors, errors along the way.
Yeah. Look, I got to say something to anybody listening and watching this. I hope we didn't lose you with some of the technical talk and some of the words like Figma, mock. You were referring to a design mockup. Figma's the tool, et cetera, because the principles are the same. The principles are design things, for each stage carefully, and you can use, a chat GPT to help you along those stages, but you're breaking it up into nice components, whether that's a workflow in your operations or it's actual software. So I think the principles are the same and that it applies universally. Praveen, I got to wrap up. I just realized how long we've been talking and I've really enjoyed this. So I've got to ask you another question, but before we get there, what's the best way for people to find and connect with you?
Yeah. So find us online, hirefraction.com, or feel free to hit me on LinkedIn. definitely pretty active over there. DM me or just reach out.
Awesome. All right. So my last question, who has had the biggest impact on your leadership style and how you approach your role today?
Yeah, so thinking about this, I actually have to give a shout out to my co-founder, Raju Deshi, who is the co-founder of HiddenLevers. And so she was sort of my partner in crime for, call it 11 years, and had a huge impact on as we built that company, in terms of leadership style and just sort of understanding. And the thing, actually, the biggest lesson I took away from that before I worked with him, I had a failed startup that failed because I was trying to do it too much by myself.
Hmm.
And so I was hoping to find someone whenever I started something again that could complement my own weaknesses. And I definitely found that in him. So we had a complementary set of skills. And that was, and we didn't often agree on things, at least not at the beginning of a debate about like how should we make decision X for the company? What should the marketing strategy be? What should the business strategy be? Et cetera, et cetera. And so there was lots of, I'm sure our employees will remember, it sounded like drag out fights, but actually it was very positive and constructive because we would end up with a decision that was in between. And so, and usually better than either idea that either of us started with. So I think that just learning about that, having that constructive relationship with folks that bring complementary skills to the table, because you can't have a bunch of yes folks that are all the same, in terms of
Yeah,
what they know.
I love that. You don't get a polished stone without friction. So you don't get
Mhm.
the best work without some friction in your company. Now, whether that's highly vocal or just, internal mechanisms, it's a cultural thing, I suppose. But I think that's awesome. I love hearing about that. And these people in your life make you better as a result if you're willing to go through it with them. That's great.
Sure.
All right. I want to give a huge thank you to Praveen Ghanta, the CEO and co-founder of Fraction, for being on this episode of The Customer Wins. Go check out Praveen's website at hirefraction.com. And don't forget to check out Quick at quickforms.com, where we make processing forms easy. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. We'll click the like button, share this with someone, and subscribe to our channels for future episodes of The Customer Wins. Praveen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks again, Rich.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Wins podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.